Welcome back to the class, everyone. Today we are going to be ranking GAC Omicrons. Omicrons are one of the rarest resources in the entire game, so it's important that we take a good look here and see where the most value is for your roster. So this isn't going to just be a hard and fast, this one's the best, this one's the worst. We're going to have them in a few different categories so that you can kind of see again what you have for your roster, what you have built up, what you already have geared or going for you, and you can kind of make a wise decision from there. And I will note before we get into the whole list of what's good, what's bad, what's kind of in the middle, I do want to mention we're not going to really be talking about these four Omicrons right now. And it's just because it's very early since these characters have come out. Most of them are barely free to play farmable, so we don't have a lot of access to what it's going to look like for the average player. I guess Terran Malicos isn't even really out there right now. That being said, I realize Marin and Captain Rex are doing amazing things right now, but one of the points of this video is separating a good character and a good Omicron. If there's a great, we're going to see this a lot today. Sometimes you have a really great character and the Omicron does absolutely nothing for them. So again, take this with a grain of salt, but right now we're not really going to be discussing them. Rex, Marin, and Terran all look very good. Saw, I don't see a lot of weight in, but again, it can't really go into detail on them right now. So first off, we're going to be talking about what we're going to call the transformative Omicrons. This is essentially our S tier or A tier, whatever you want to call it, the highest tier of Omicrons out there. And the reason why they're labeled transformative is because when you put the Omicron on, the team essentially changes in nature so much that not every single counter, but most of the relevant counters they're going to be a part of are all going to change. Certain things are just going to magically stop working or start working depending on whether or not you have these ones applied. I'm not putting them in any particular order. They're all very good. I guess you could probably make there's actually a really good argument for this top line being better than the bottom line, but that isn't going to necessarily be consistent throughout the entire video. So let's get into these. So Malgus right off the bat, this one is awesome because his leadership adds a ton of stuff within the Omicron, like speed, mastery, as well as a bunch of healing when there's a lot of debuffs going around. One of the things that I like the most that we're going to pinpoint is 80% critical avoidance. The reason why this matters is because right now Malgus has about a 60% hold rate against General Skywalker when General Skywalker is trying to go and kill him. And the 80% critical avoidance ends up making a large difference because whenever Gas is going in and critting the Sith Empire team, he's not only doing more damage because he's critically hitting, but he is increasing cooldowns. So by putting this on, you're not necessarily completely annihilating the General Skywalker counter, but is now becoming significantly more difficult, as well as you stop a few funny counters like Qui-Gon Jinn from being able to work because of the amount of healing that are coming the amount of healing that's coming from the debuffs that you're giving to yourself through ferocity or other means. Overall, just fantastic. If you have Malgus in any capacity and even remotely like GAC, the leadership is a no-brainer. It is transformative. It's going to magically kind of change up the comp. This does not apply to the special and the unique. We will talk about those a little bit later, but they're really not in the transformative comp. Starkiller is up next. This is going to be for a very similar reason. There is much conflict in you is the one we're going to be talking about. This immediately changes several matches. It is very hard, wildly hard to get Starkiller to beat Rey without this. Not only is the 35 speed important to be able to get ahead of those important characters on the enemy team, but also having him constantly assist whenever Palpatine is using his basic is going to be majorly important, because without that, it's really how you get to your ult. That's how you do most of your damage. That's how he gets going so that he can be able to bring down the ship on everyone. So it's critically important. It changes a lot of the counters, not to mention defensively. It becomes a really easy team to take out if they don't have that going for them, because they just don't have nearly as much damage. It's essentially a glorified Emperor Palpatine team at that point in time, whereas once you put on the unique, it becomes a lot better. The specials are actually pretty good, but again, we will talk about them later. As for now, we're going to leave them be. Darth Traya, very good character, but even better Omicron. Number one, I like the fact this is on her unique, so that she can kind of go in and out of whatever Sith team she wants and apply it. The fact that they get bonus protection here, this is really pivotal, and this is going to come up a little bit when we talk about Reva. This is the reason why they can take down the Inquisitors, because bonus protection doesn't care about healing immunity. You get to stack it up as much as you want, regardless if you have locked healing immunity or normal. You don't need to worry about having to cleanse it, although Darth Traya can do that. And then on top of that, it just starts to add in all these massive bonuses like critical damage, max health, offense, more offense, Cooldown's also being reduced at 90%, which is really pivotal for Gas trying to beat Trey, because Nihilus gets his Annihilate before you can kill him, and he just annihilates Gas, which is fantastic. Next up is going to be Savage. Savage on his own is pretty good. When paired with Darth Trey, he does start to change defensive comps as well. Troopers actually have a really good shot at killing Trey. They can just go right after and kill her, unless Savage is there, in which case they can't even get close. He also makes Imperial Troopers significantly harder, because when they start to get their contract, they're going to have to be hitting our good friend here, and when they do, he's going to be gaining, or he's going to be giving 10% turn meter to the rest of the team. They're going to be able to catch up. You're not going to be able to annihilate nearly as soon. And then he just gets so much from this. He gets a ton of defense. He gets more speed. He gets more health. He gets more defense on top of the more defense, if that makes sense. Just overall a great fit for him, where he can be used again to solo kind of teams on his own, or be used in conjunction with Darth Trey leadership. Next up is going to be Third Sister. This is, again, kind of a no-brainer. It is going to be on her leadership. And the big thing is here, you are going to be applying Death Mark onto characters whenever they cleanse. This ends up cutting out a lot of things and just makes really big matches against characters like Jabba a lot easier. Teams that have a ton of defense or protection up that are really thick and hard to chew through, this just makes it a lot easier. Even if they only have 1 or 2 cleanses, as soon as the locked Death Mark gets put on him, you can start to be able to chew him down. And then there's just a lot of other things within the kit that help them be able to bring those down. Whereas Inquisitors, quite frankly, are still pretty good even without that, because of the locked healing immunity that just comes from a Zeta. But overall, that's kind of our first tier Transformative. If you care about GAC at all, those are really the non-negotiables. Next up is going to be Transformative 2. These are also all very, very good. That being said, they're a little bit more unique for your roster going forward. Wampa is a really great one to talk about that is good for probably about 99% of the players. He does fall off a little bit towards the end game in 5v5, just because the caliber of teams that you end up facing are going to just have some way to deal with him, whether it be an irresistible stun, or tenacity down, or just or stealth to keep him from even being able to counter and gain turn meter. There's a lot going on there, but he'll crush so many early, mid, and even some end game teams. And one of the big things that I love about him so much is that he is his own team. If you apply the Omicron in GAC, you don't need to worry about gearing or relicking up or doing anything else. You already have the whole team. Of course, he does want good mods and things of the sort, but he's already right there. And I think he will devalue a little bit over time, but we'll see what CG does. He might get a lifter similar to how Fulcrum got one, where she was supposed to be used alone, and that very quickly got changed up for her. Next up is going to be Ben Solo. He's also kind of in this depends on where you're at list. If you don't have Rey, this is terrible. The character as a whole honestly doesn't really do anything at all. Completely forget this if you don't have Rey. Maybe skip ahead in the video 10 seconds or something like that. But basically, the reason why he actually has 2 Omicrons we're going to be talking about that kind of land in the Transformative area. First one is Force Dyad. This is such an annoying mechanic, where if the enemy in the leader slot begins their turn with Ben Solo defeated, Ben still has an active ally, he revives with 51% health. So he's constantly going to revive. This makes particular JML very annoying, because he can't keep doing what we want to do, because he keeps coming back, because JML is going to be taking significantly more turns than everyone else, because he's a Galactic Legend and his base speed is way higher. It also does some other interesting things versus JMK, but overall it's mostly for that. And as well as the obscured Omicron here does have a really huge impact on C. If he lands 4 turns healing immunity, even C or really other Galactic Legends with their massive speed amounts, they can't really shake this off quickly in the time that Rey's Whirlwinds and her ultimate are just going to end up killing them. So again, Ben Solo, Transformative. If you have Rey, don't even bother if you don't. Next up is going to be Iden Versio. Iden Versio is, again, going to kind of fit into that Wampa style, where she is very good, but depending on what you're facing, you might not see a whole lot out of her. I do like her at higher relics just because of where she's with Defender, but the Omicron allows her team to gain massive amounts of turn meter whenever anyone is attacking out of turn. And nowadays, there's so many different teams that do it. You have kind of the more basic teams like Mon Mothma and Geonosians, but even more advanced teams like CLS that she's able to counter in both 5v5 and 3v3. And none of that really happens if you take this away. The max health and protection is also nice. Seer is kind of a new team, probably one of the newest Omicrons to make this list, period. But she's already proving her weight, and I think she's going to only get better with Malicos entering into the game. Right now, she is going to already give the team some really nice bonuses for health and protection, but also, and this is really where the Omicron is going to shine, they're going to be immune to ability block and daze. The reason why this matters is because Bad Batch rip Seer apart if they aren't immune to daze. If they are, if you can daze them, you can not only daze them, but you can stun them with tech and just completely debilitate the entire team, take control, and then wipe them out. if they're immune to that, you don't get to do any of that. You have to rely on Wrecker's 2-turn stun, which is typically slower. And if that messes, you're just in a huge mess, because not only are they not stunned, but you never daze them in the first place. And then there's all this other stuff in here that happens as well. There's actually a lot that happens in here. So you're going to get a lot more damage and just make the team a lot more potent than it was before. And again, fitting this term of transformative, where it's going to go. Qui-Gon Jinn, I love him. He's still one of my favorites, even all the way at the top. He's very useful. His leadership, one of the things that I like about this is it will get as good as you want to make it. If you're just wanting to use some dumb Jedi team with this and just watch them get an extra 30 times their speed offense, that's great. If you want to put in Jedi Anakin, make a time bomb so they have to use at least Bad Batch. Also great. If you want to throw in Mace and Cam and give them a bunch of stupid speed to crush all the Bad Batches that come across them. If you want to take it on offense to start taking down some bigger teams, it can do all of that. It's very respectable for where you're at the game, whether it be early, mid, or end game. And it just, I mean, Qui-Gon Jinn's not doing anything. There's nothing really to even transform before the Omicron's there, because he's that beaten down. So those are really the most important ones. Next up, we're gonna fall into the useful category. Useful is not going to necessarily just wildly change every single relevant matchup, but it is going to change the team at heart, and it is going to make it just a little bit better. So Asajj Ventress has this really cool mechanic where she goes in with, and it's actually under her Rampage, her Endless Wrath ability is now going to apply healing immunity. When you pair this with Plague, you essentially you put the team on a time bomb, because they can't heal to get rid of the Plague because of the healing immunity, and they can't cleanse the healing immunity because of the Plague, and it's just a death sentence. Not only that, but you get an added in reduction of max health and I believe defense, which is very good against teams like Malgus if you're trying to clean them up. Not to mention protection recovery, which is nice, but Marin is kind of doing that on her own. I did remod my Asajj fully for potency after this, because I want the max health reduction very much, or the healing immunity, because that's really all her kit is to me right now, especially at Gear 12. First order TIE Pilot Omicron, again, he's going to make whatever team you kind of put him on better for first order, except for SLK himself. The issue is, sometimes it just doesn't change the match. Like if you put down a really bad Phasma team without crew or anything like that, it makes the team better, but Wampa can still solo it. So you're not seeing that same transformative effect that we would be seeing otherwise, but it does let the team do some nice things. I've used it both in 3v3 and 5v5s to some great effect, both as one-shots as well as cleanups. It's gotten to do some good stuff. Next up is going to be Dash's leadership. It pretty much allows everyone to always stay prepared. For those of you who are unaware, this is a Vandor, Chewbacca Omicron. That's all it is. If you have Vandor Chewbacca on the team and he's going to constantly revive everyone, you essentially just turn into Scoundrel Night Sisters, which is very effective both on offense and defense. If you don't have Vandor, this literally does almost nothing, because most of the prepared characters can get prepared on their own, and they don't need to have it every single second, every single time. Next up is going to be Ben Solo. We're actually going to be talking this time about his redeemed Omicron, where he ignores protection. It's really not going to transform every single counter, but there are some scenarios where once he builds up enough mastery because of Inspire and turn meter gain, he will just start one-shotting teams, which is nice, because he can hit fully under protection. I've had him completely annihilate my Hoda with JML one time, and it was very depressing. Next up is going to be Aphra, and this is going to be Aphra's leadership. While this is not nearly as effective as, say, Reva or Malgus or Starkiller, it is still very good. It's not going to change every single matchup. Right now, we still have Aphras actually out there beating Jabba without this, because they're able to do it in Squad Arena. And the reason why this is going to get a little bit lower on the totem pole as well is because it's only available in 5v5, but it gives Aphra just everything she wants. She has more potency. She's going to be able to get more turn meter. They're going to have some critical avoidance. They have speed. It's just an overall good ability to have. Not necessarily going to change every single matchup, but again, still under that same exact category of useful. Next up is going to be, again, more useful characters. Starkillers, let's talk about his second and third Omicrons. So the Boundless Force Throw, this one actually might fall into more of the niche category, but we'll talk about it right now. This essentially solves the JTR problem in Rey teams. If you ever fought in a Rey and JTR was allowed to get inspired, she's going to end up with a ton of dodge and evasion. Well, if you can start putting locked debuffs on her, like healing immunity, you can start to do a ton of damage because she can't heal from it, and eventually Starkiller will just take her down. But what the more relevant second Omicron right now to give Starkiller is actually dispel all buffs on all enemies. This, again, doesn't transform every single fight out there, but there are several right now that this does make a difference. If he's allowed to dispel all the debuffs, he's going to be getting more damage per not debuffs. But getting rid of all the buffs is going to be able to get more damage with each buff going away. This is becoming more relevant in raid teams, especially with all these random Datacrons out there that are giving extra buffs like protection up against Tuskens or Lord Vader. It's actually allowed him to one-shot my Lord Vader one time because of the amount of damage he gets, and it doesn't matter which target he's hitting, because he can dispel it from all of them now once you have the Omicron applied to that special one. Tusken Raider, similar to Aphra, this is actually pretty good in a lot of situations, but it's subjected to just one game mode, so it isn't as good. And I will say this, it's a little bit like Qui-Gon Jinn in the sense that if you're just starting out and you need more teams, it's okay with your normal Tuskens like and Shaman. If you pair this with Chieftain and Warrior, who are newer characters, it is so stinking good. The only really budget counter in all of 3v3 that can beat this is General Skywalker, which really is not that budget. Most other things, once you have all the right pieces, Tusken Raider at Relics with the Omicron as well as Chieftain and Warrior at Relics, it becomes a massive pain in the butt to be able to take down. It is very good. Hondo's in here as well. He does change, again, some matchups when you're putting on the Smuggler team. If he's going first and he has all that turn meter, he can start to lock up really important characters like Piet on the Trooper team, or maybe Bosk on the Bounty Hunter team, and keep them from doing what they're doing, because it's really all his Omicron ends up being is that he gets that turn meter to boot at the very beginning. He does get some more bonuses here, which are kind of nice, but again, it's useful, not necessarily the end of the world for the rest of the teams. Zori is going to be on here as well. This does help against Night Sisters. If you're being able to apply an expose to every single character every time, even if they have really high tenacity or tenacity up or something like that, it does help kind of cut out that Night Sister team, because eventually Doc will just build up with like 16 exposes if a Marin can't cleanse her, and then she'll one-shot her, or really anyone with an AoE will one-shot her. So Resistance Hero Finn would probably be the likely one. It also makes even the crappy Zori comps beat Wampa, which is kind of sad for Wampa. Adrad is going to be in here as well. This doesn't really fundamentally change a ton of counters, but just kind of finishes the kit. This is one way that you can make Bad Batch a lot harder by getting more max protection as well, and then you're getting all of these buffs. And really, without these buffs, you're never really going to land a kill until you get to the ultimate, which is kind of fine because a lot of fights, that's how they work. So again, useful, not necessarily super great game-breaking. And our last-ish category is going to be niche. What do we mean by niche? I mean, if we want to actively defend the Omicrons that we're seeing here, and I guess we can actually take Ben off. I think we actually repeated him twice. Every single character that falls in here, you have to start your sentences with the word if like 6 different times to really justify. Like, let's look at Luminar, and I can talk about Luminar because I have Luminars. So Luminar has this really nice ability where her heal becomes a cleanse and she gains speed. The only issue is it doesn't work with protection up. So this at an eye's glance can appear good, but again, you have to start a sentence with if like 6 times. So if you have the Qui-Gon Jinn Omicron on offense, because on defense she won't use this cleanse properly, and if your General Anakin hasn't used his AoE yet because he'll have protection up, and if the other team actually had a detrimental debuff that you needed to cleanse in the first place, and if you actually needed the 50 speed because the General Anakin is getting turned, so you just get into these kind of long-winded sentences where I can see how at the end of the day the Omicron has some use, but it's just so like wildly niche of a situation. I wouldn't recommend applying, for example, Luminars or really any of these that fall into this category. Our good friend 000 here is gonna kind of land in the same category. If you look at his torture lasts for an extra turn and they gain a little bit more offense. Like, that's, again, there's gonna be one match out there where Aphra comes this close from killing an important character and the whole thing kind of goes south. But for the most part, BT1 either completely chews through the enemy or he doesn't. That it's not really conditional on this going for 2 full turns. Another good example is Krennic. Krennic is actually probably one of the best examples. The Omicron is really nice because it adds defense, penetration, health, offense, and then if Death Trooper is present, he also gets these bonuses, and their cooldowns get to do reduced. So overall, it looks pretty good, but most people have their Death Trooper with Iden. Most people can't even give other good Empire characters like Thrawn or Vader because they're either playing with Palpatine or Lord Vader or doing something of the sort. So you just get into these long-winded conversations of, well, if you have Thrawn and you need to beat the specific team and your Iden's doing something else, or you don't have Iden, and again, can be useful, but ultimately it's just going to end up falling flat because you don't meet the 6 prior criteria to be able to get there. Admiral Akbar is going to kind of fall into a similar category. He is more aimed, I think, at early game. So one of those ifs would be if you're early on and you don't really have a lot of teams and you geared him up because of the ship. But overall, The Omicron isn't all that great. It doesn't change the matchup a lot. And this one, we're going to be talking about some secondary Omicrons. So I believe the same thing for our good friend Malgus's unique here. It's a little bit annoying. He is going to give doubt to 2 more characters every single time it expires, or really, rather to all enemies instead of to 2 enemies. The reason why this is so underwhelming, if you're in 3v3 in the first place, there's only 3 enemies total. So if doubt's going off of 1 character onto 2 all other characters, that is every character. So this doesn't even affect 3v3 at all. If you're in another one where they're not even dispelling it, but it's just going away, that also doesn't have any effect because the doubt was already working. Or again, there's a lot of categories where you start to have to pin these through for this to even be considered good. Deprived Senses is kind of the same way. If you're in a very specific C battle where the opponent didn't take in a bunch of allies and you have the ability block change just right between Basilisk Fall on him and Talon, then you kill the C. But again, if you can't fall into all that criteria, it's not going to end up being all that good. Reva's going to be the same for her 2 other specials, or rather her unique and her special. This one is the one that makes me the really most sad. Like, whenever she's revived from Hatred, the cooldown of Unyielding Onslaught is refreshed. She gains 100% offense until her next turn and ignores taunt. If your Reva's been killed once, your Inquisitor team is probably already dead, and that 1 turn of getting to come out is not going to be enough to wipe out the entire enemy team. This one seems okay, but again, this doesn't change any matchups that I can immediately think of. Yes, having your cooldowns reduced by 1 is nice, but it doesn't stop Treya, and Reva is still beating all those higher tier teams without it. This was one that I feel like does need a lot of clarification on, and we talked about this concept in the very beginning of the video. Just because you have a good character does not mean the Omicron is good, and Talon might be one of the best examples of that. So I realized that right now, Treya, Savage, and Talon all on defense in the same team, 3v3 or 5v5, is one of the best defensive teams out there. It typically requires a Galactic Legend or something of similar value to take it out. That is amazing. None of that is coming because of her Omicron. While Talon's place on the team is important because she kind of annihilates a lot of counters that allow them to go right for the leader, like Jedi Knight Revan, because now her entire team is going to be gaining a bunch of turn meter. And Treya also kind of has a semi-savior ability because of this, and she's the leader. And Talon also does add some nice stats to the team overall that I don't think should be taken for granted. But this specific line of effect really is a drop in the bucket of every single thing that team is doing. If target enemy is isolated or has pain, you gain additional effects where you gain 5% max protection and 5% offense for each stack for a loyal hand. And then I think it even lists some more stuff in here. Dark Frenzy inflicts buff immunity on all enemies. Isolate attacks, lower the cooldown of Dark Frenzy. It's just not, again, similar to what we were talking about with Reva. This isn't changing anything. So, great character. Definitely put her on your Treya team, but don't think that you need 3 Omicrons for that team to function. The first 2 on Savage and Treya are already kind of doing enough. Avra's going to be here for her other 2. Again, they're just not really doing a whole lot. The Droid Savant one in particular just makes me really sad. The first time a non-separatist dark side droid or dark side scout or ally falls below 20% health, they gain damage immunity. I can't remember the last time that it became important for a character that fell below 20% health. By the way, that means if a character has 30% health and something kills them, like they go from 30 to 0, this doesn't save them. They have to fall exactly between 20% and 0 for the damage immunity to kick in. So just ultimately not adding a whole lot of value. That's just a very rare occasion of something that's ever even going to happen. But again, they're not terrible, but you're looking for very specific situations for these to become important. I guess we'll talk about Chrysanthemum a little bit, and this is one that I have that again falls into the niche category. I do still kind of like it because I feel like it completes the rest of his kit, but for the most part, 40% max protection isn't changing the majority of battles. 30% less potency also isn't. Right now, Night Sisters, who are kind of a potency-dependent team, they have everything they need. They're just going to apply tenacity down to him or something of the sort, or Mother Talzin's going to give more than enough through her leadership to be able to take him out. It's not going to actually actively change enough. You're going after Job, I mean, he just gets killed with an AoE by SLKR. It's, again, we're just looking at very niche situations for these to actually come in and make a difference. And last and most certainly least, this is the only one, like I'm sure there are going to be people watching this video right now or commenting, saying about how this character or that Omicron actually did help them win a match once or twice, and that's great. But this is the one that I just, this one is just bad. There's almost no excuse for this. And BT1 falls into the same category as Talon. Amazing character, wonderful character. This is hot garbage. This does absolutely nothing for the team. Whenever BT1 or 000 defeat an enemy, their cooldowns are refreshed and they gain 30% turn meter. The number one, it only works in 3v3, where you're only going to have 2 enemies dying that even matter. If you already killed them, number one, the match is probably already going in your direction. You don't really need the rest of this stuff to happen. Cooldowns being refreshed, why? BT1's best move is his basic anyways. 30% turn meter, which is a very shallow amount, especially when there's so many ways to stop that. Doubt, shock, or doubt, shock, or daze, or really any other debuff that is going to be stopping turn meter. There's just so little that this does. This is not, I would be shocked if someone could come up with a scenario where this is actually going to change any loss, or even like a banner or two from a loss to a win. Yeah, this just seems like an entire sink. And I think there's a lot of, not miscommunication, but misconception that Afro is good in 5v5 if you have her Omicrons, and BT1 is good in 3v3 if you have his, and it's just not true. The team is good. I'm not trying to hit on Afro or BT1 in any way, but this Omicron in particular is just such a trap and is going to do absolutely nothing for that team in any regard. So let me know what you guys think, which ones you have applied, which ones you found to be super useful. Until next time, stay awesome.